in the very beginning of this game that there was this Concilium Hall, and it had these 5 doors, and they would be opened by the artifacts.
There were 6 of them, because there was 5, 1 for each of the counselors, and then Arnox's Staff of Tiana's, and then, which ended up being Lorna's.
Lorna's Staff of Tiana.
That artifact had the power to command all of the other Hall's artifacts, the Astrolabe, the Ignium, the Hydroponic Quartz. But yes, that was one of the very first things I set up, was those artifacts. It was the backstory, really, the history of this Concilium Hall before the drought happened. And that was the original premise of the game.
It does feel very much like this thing that we are doing right now. It has been really to talk about the characters, and I feel like it's probably been better than having people do it one-on-one. But we should do a Q&A too, because we have so much material that we haven't told you yet. We have an encyclopedia for Acts 0 to 4. We also had one for just the Unsleeping City. And there's also ones for just like the mountain. And then we have one specifically for Act 5 involving player goals and like lines and veils, themes that we got to talk about this stuff eventually. But the Concilium Hall, this is its original concept right here. Top room has 5 doors, a staircase that comes from a business front, which is in the center of Anchorage. It's got this giant mana battery in the middle of it, and it was used by the previous Concilium, but it's been in stasis since Lumen did that thing to all those people about 50 years ago. And there's the Hall Cult, but this is the map. And I'm sure that those of you who resurrected...
I spent so much time looking at this map.
I know, right? So you'd come in through the staircase here, which kind of like winds out of the ceiling. And then there's all the residential rooms where a lot of you spent some time. Like many of you had rooms here. Arnok offered in the first Concilium meeting when everyone was getting murdered that you could stay. And who took Arnok up on that offer here?
Oh, he just had his own place. We had the witch base basically at that time.
Yeah, we also had the witch base. I think very specifically Vizier did not. Vizier did not trust staying in the Concilium Hall.
But after the resurrection.
Diva did after the resurrection.
Yeah, I think Lasso was bunking in there.
Yeah, for like a day.
Yeah, I don't think even then. I think the only place in the Concilium Hall that Vizier ever slept was the library once.
Now, Diva had a room that it was one of those rooms that didn't seem to have any beds or anything. And after I said I would take that room, Nasa was like, isn't that a closet? And I was like, oh, even better.
Yeah, we've got the kitchen. A lot of antics went on in the kitchen. Things were cooked. Things were brought to ants. There was a lot of effort around the spirit courts. The
Eclipse made lots of banana bread.
Lots of banana bread. Yeah, and a lot of people did research in this library. It's true. Styx did a lot of research there.
I don't even know what that library looks like.
Yeah, you were mostly hanging out with the ants. And also, let's not forget the room that Aegis had to seal off down here.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, that was because mages were like just sticking their hands everywhere, and these crystals would explode if you cast the wrong spell on them from the wrong arcana. And I was like,
wonder who that
most definitely gonna happen. I'm just like, okay, let's ward this off right now. This sure that nobody can just enter here. But that was also
kind of great.
Everybody got woken up from their cocoon.
That's right. Everyone got woken up from the cocoon in here. Though I do like to have in my head canon that there is still one cocoon that was hanging in that room the entire time.
That was Hermanubis.
Tempest.
Yeah.
Yeah, where to start? I mean,
Start with Klaus.
okay. So Klaus was my character, Klaus Vaak, actually, which is a Dutch name for the Sandman, actually. And he was an Neonaut, or is. He was called to Alaska to help the mages there, which he did try to do, and sometimes succeeded, sometimes didn't. Like one of the first sessions we had, Klaus defeated this abyssal entity in Uncle Sam's head. That was definitely, he killed it with fire, very appropriately. And after that, he kind of like just started to explore around. He went on an expedition. That's where he met most of the other characters. He already met Tante Corr, but that's where he met Alazohat.
So you're talking about after the Unsleeping City, then?
Yeah, after I totally missed that one. We went on the expedition into the city, which was maybe Atlantis, maybe not. We're not sure. Maybe we'll never be sure, but it was awesome. Like this was this entire city full of magic, full of people. And that's where we went with a character named Ruin. That a painful thing that happened to him. We couldn't save him. Tante Corr was there. Catalyst was there.
Eclipse. And we can't forget a character who would one day become Tempest, Hermanubis. Who was actually, back in the day, there were 3 first players to this game, even before the Unsleeping City.
And do you know who the third one was?
Well, it was Fae. We had to
was
Fae, of course.
That makes a lot of sense.
They were playing a different character, though, named Sherlock.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds cool.
That was the expedition to the oil rig.
I go to an oil rig later. Yeah, I did, but that's
the same
later.
one.
The same one, of course. But we were exploring the city. There were these flaming skulls that were like guides or something that you could ask questions. There was this entire computer system that's like completely integrated in the power grid of the city, which was pretty cool. So we were just basically going to the middle of the city, and that's where Ruin met his wife, or at least we think it was his wife. He was going to be part of an art competition, I remember. That's where everything went south. Like, terribly, terrible. And he kind of just embraced the abyss there. We tried to stop it, it's just a little bit too late. Maybe if we asked him more questions before it happened, maybe we could have avoided it, but by then it was already too late. But Paz, ever the hopeful person he is, said, no, we're going to go after him, and we're going to try and convince him to not be in league with the Abyss. So we tried to find him. Apparently, he was somewhere in the underworld that we found out after some divination from Tante Corr. And then we went to a quarter that was run by the Tremere, but we didn't really know much about them, apparently. And then there was this vague warning, like, mind your soul, it was, Tante Corr said, mind your soul. Forewarned and everything, There was like a huge mall, and that's where a team sent by a councillor named Beholder caught up with us.
Well, you kind of had them with you all along. Well, when Dragon was there. So Dragon shows up.
Yeah.
They bring that team with them. And they're there looking, in fact, for Ruin. They were hunting them. Or at least that's what Dragon was doing. Secretly, that team had brought a extra-dimensional portal to try to take part of the city outside. And that kind of worked, as it did get shunted into Pandemonium. That portal to a Hell Mall comes back later in this game because Beholder for the next 2 years keeps it inside of like this little pocketed space.
Yeah, but that kind of thwarted our attempt to find Ruin and help him. And that's when we fled into the spiritual side of things, the shadow. And we had a little bit of a problem with the spirit, I remember. basically a tornado spirit trying to suck everyone into itself. We luckily escaped that one. And then we got cornered by the inhabitants of the city because they thought that we were responsible for the incredible massive destruction of that mall, which wasn't the case, but, eventually we got exonerated. That's really when we encountered the ladder at the center of the city. We had a conversation that was below the surface. And we had a conversation with an Archmaster called the Mistress. We asked them some questions. That was really interesting because I do believe she had like a clue for us about what the Abyss is. And that's really when things started to become more worrisome because turns out the city was doomed.
Out of game. The Mistress, who is down there at the bottom, the Archmistress of Death, is the person who invented the concept of death, which is, of course, from our Wars and Witchcraft podcast, our friend Victoria's character of Ermengarde Ward.
So much happened, but that wasn't really cool. The city was about to get flooded by these huge waves, these tsunamis, basically. We went to the center of the city because there would be a mage there that would be able to help. And turned out that mage looked exactly like Tante Corr, called the Creator. That person actually offered us some dragons and some pillars or menhirs.
It was there that they gave you the things that were going to protect the city from being destroyed. Though, having established those, it did not actually save the city. There was no way to completely save the city. However, you did manage to survive yourselves and take a record of the data out with you.
Also a matter of Catalyst giving birth in the city. That happened about the same time, if I remember correctly. And after we escaped, Dragon disappeared.
And where did Dragon disappear to, I question?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Greg, take it away.
I don't know if it's always apparent when I play the game, but when I make a character, I like to have a lot of room for growth in my head. It tends to mean that when I make a new character, they're either wicked or incompetent or something along those lines. So Dragon was a character who was misanthropic, and my growth arc roughly in my head for her was that she was going to become less so over time. But part of that also maybe fed into that was also maybe not being the best guardian in the world. Certainly when she was sent to look into this pretty big mission, she was a character with roughly no XP, a fairly new character, so she didn't have a whole lot at her disposal, and I'm a fairly new player to mage, so I didn't necessarily know how to work the system to complete a mission successfully either. So essentially she failed at her mission, and everyone just got away, and she just had to go back and say, I don't know, he got away. And the Guardians of the Veil were not very happy with that, so they she was punished or on probation or something along those lines.
Had to stay in Alaska, which no one wants.
Yeah, especially want to be there, but they were like, no, you got to stay here. As part of that, they stripped her identity and gave her a new one, and that's why Suki came along and said, I don't know, I just showed up here, and everyone thought, well, that's obvious. What can you do?
One of my favorite things with Suki, who is Dragon, who later goes by another name, Lhasa, was this first rebirth, because it really informed a lot of how you perceived the Guardians. The Guardians being these duplicitous, yet they have this purpose. The purpose is to protect people, which is in theory a very noble purpose. And I think that, if anything, Suki was the nobler side of the Guardians. She really wanted to help people. She was put in charge of another brand new Guardian, essentially, and the two of you just had these small, intimate sessions where you started to learn about the Seers of the Throne and learn about what the Guardians were.
I think some of my favorite sessions were those sessions, yeah, absolutely. I think some of the things that's reflected on that for me is smaller intimate sessions are sometimes some of the best. You don't need to make a big grand scene necessarily to make a really memorable thing. I still remember that day we were running around having lumberjacks chase us, and I think the overwhelming sense, this works so well in any horror setting, but the overwhelming sense that you cannot escape because I guess it's like Neo walking around in the Matrix where any one of them can turn into an agent. Like when anyone can be mind controlled at a distance, you just have this feeling of dread. Like, how do we deal with this? Lovely. So memorable and so much fun in this setting.
Before all of the Seers catching you went down, the reason why the Seers were after you was because you had invaded their astral realm in a way. You had started exploring the astral realms. And do you remember what gave you that hint to explore the astral realms? Because this is one of the big secrets about this game, in fact.
There was a box in an attic that fell through the roof suddenly as the roof suddenly decayed to a point where it couldn't hold it anymore, and the box just fell out of the roof. There was this dusty old box, and in it there was a book that was all about astral projection. It seemed like it had been there for years, and it just sort of like fell into our hands almost literally at the right time.
Someone was guiding into your hands, in fact, someone who wanted you to know about the nonsense that the Seers were doing. And do you have a guess as to who that might have been?
Well, I think at the time I thought this is Lumen or an oracle. I didn't know if I knew the name Lumen at the time.
Yeah, it was. In fact, you've correctly deduced, maybe by being on both sides of the veil, that Lumen was in fact pushing you to try to protect Allgate. Lumen is a huge character in this arc. Lumen is kind of the reason why Allgate is so difficult. Lumen, had like a whole society of mages here. And when the player characters arrive in Allgate, there is not a whole society of mages for them to rely upon. They're kind of stuck with Arnok and his court of, I'm going to say it, mostly incompetent mages.
And certainly mages that had other interests than just protecting Allgate. Arnok, that was his main interest, but I think he was the only one.
Well, I would also say that because Arnok was already using the Staff of Tiana by that point, that he was being controlled by Lumen, and that's why it was his main motivation. He was really being manipulated himself.
Very true. One thing I'm curious if anybody will catch is Lumen used to go by another name. And I want to see if anybody knows it.
No clue. I think I've missed too many clues for that one.
There are a lot of clues hidden in part of the Concilium Hall.
Hey, Brian, do you want to talk about Ammonite?
I mean, when I started this, I knew that I was really lost in like the game itself. And I just sort of knew that I was going to not know what to do a lot of times and take a lot of storyteller suggestions naively and just see what happens. Just kind of go with the flow.
Hey, does that sound familiar to anybody else on the channel?
Me.
Oh boy, yes.
So we can relate. That's good. Ammonite just kind of started as a regular guy, had a job, corporate job. His job was dangerous, I suppose. It was a sound engineer, but I mean, he was working underwater, and that's always dangerous. Working in underwater caves, even more dangerous. It's unforgiving and cold, and there's a lot of pressure down there, and one wrong move, and he got into an accident deep underwater, gained magical abilities in that accident, just sort of, I think, meandered through the process of just not being able to exist in the normal world. Like, I think there was a scene where Ammonite, it was just with me and Cassidy. He went back to the office after having disappeared for months. Everyone was like surprised. Like, oh, you're still alive? And like, hey, do I have a job still? And they're like, sure. If one of my coworkers actually survived,
That's true.
There was a moment in my head. I was like, oh, do I want to like investigate this coworker even more? Did something happen with them, or are they totally normal?
I mean, if you had investigated them, I bet they wouldn't have been totally normal. Probably a seer or something,
Right? So. That day back at work was awful for Ammonite, and just decided to completely ghost his day job again. I think that's when Eclipse showed up and brought Ammonite to Augate, which seemed to have nothing but trouble.
That's true. And in fact, you almost inherited a lot of that trouble. The being that caused your accident down in the bottom of the ocean, that earthquake which sealed the cave shut, was the rival and enemy in a lot of ways of your mentor, played by Charlotte, Eclipse, because it was Tecton.
Tecton was one of the first things ever created in Augate, actually.
Interesting. Oh. I didn't know Tecton was a rival. Tecton always seemed like just necessary. I didn't think of Tecton as like a rival. It just was like something powerful, but not like evil.
I don't think of Tecton as evil. I do think of Tecton as naturally destructive to human life, which you may interpret as evil, but humanity's doing its own thing, messing up nature, so why shouldn't nature mess back?
Why shouldn't Tecton respond? And then, so a lot of my thought behind that was like, okay, how can we get Tecton to like just chill out? And I suppose Tecton is chilled out now.
Oh my god, he's so chill.
In great part to you guys' effort.
Tecton, like, I felt it was almost like inverted in terms of like spirit and essence. Like, you know, if Tecton has a lot of essence, or Tecton will sleep, like maybe he's like just drunk on essence and stays asleep in a way. And if Tecton loses essence, gets cranky. So you have to keep like the sleeping giant sort of at rest.
Yeah, I mean, thematically, I could imagine that. So making sacrifices every month to the volcano god or something would sort of fit that.
And our hierarch has jumped in here as well.
Monica!
Fuck!
Oh, we've almost got the whole council here.
I do believe that we were leaving the city, and then the next adventure was the mountain, if I'm not mistaken. And there was Eclipse was there, Tante Corr was there.
This was when you formed the first real cabal. Well, you didn't. You specifically did not form the first real cabal. Looking at you, Plasvak.
I know, but he had a good reason, which we will get into later. So there were 4 mages. So that would be Eclipse, Plasvak, Tante Corr, Alazuhat.
There was a 5th mage. It was Horn's character, 2 Moons.
Oh,
Yeah.
Horn just stopped playing with us after like another arc or 2, but they had such a compelling character, and especially for this. And in fact, they're a big reason why you didn't join that cabal, because they also didn't join, and so neither did Eclipse. 2 Moons took a bunch of the artifacts from the mountain hall. So there's like this secret underground, really cool dungeon down there where previous mages had essentially been experimenting on spirits using magic, and the character Alazuhad, who I'm sure Kazban wants to give his backstory at some point, destroys all the mechanisms down there made of this perfected material. It's a perfected circuit, and they never get to figure out what it does. And it rubs Klaus Vok the wrong way. He's like, you didn't ask us to destroy that. And then they do.
Not just that, but he kind of saw it as like endangering the entire group by making a unilateral choice. And Klaus Vok is free council. He likes voting on stuff. He likes democracy. Yeah, and that's when we went into the final battle.
You were fighting spirits. Eclipse summoned a big starfish to eat a bunch of abyssal spirits. The battle, I like to think of it as the Atroxis battle. And Atroxis is a spirit that is very closely tied to all of our players here.
Another plot line in the ocean sphere that was a little tied up here because of Klausvok is the rotting fish battle. That was the abyssal that had been on Arnok for a long time. Actually, it was one of the first. It had put him into a coma for weeks at some point, but it was one of the very first abyssals that showed up. Far from the last, but one of the very first.
And there's a reason why all these abyssals keep showing up in Alaska, of course.
Yeah, I still think it has something to do with all the artifacts in the Concilium Hall being used selfishly or something. That's really where I was going with.
You're coming closer to the main plot line, but I think that selfishness is a dismissive way of describing the motivations of the entities responsible.
Fair enough. But yeah, that's where class became the focal point of a ritual to get rid of rotting fish permanently. That was after Atraxos was driven off by the werewolves. And a very important character died by the name of Gaia, I remember. It was a mage working with the werewolves.
Klaus actually sacrificed himself and bonded with the spirit of rotting fish, which was one of its banes, because it had to start at the head of the hierarchy, the hierarch, and had to go down and infect people lower than him after he had taken him off. So by bonding with it at the wrong time, you actually killed it, but it took a big hit from Klaasbach. It was possible to survive, but Klaas was a little too injured at that point, and it did consume his entire body.
Who needs a body anyway?
So, Faye, do you want to talk about your first character here in Allgate? Sherlock?
So they were Sherlock Holmes. I was under the assumption that this was going to be a one-shot game. It was not. So I made a bit of a joke character. Sherlock was a Moros whose familiar was her dead wife, Dr. Watson. And yeah, she was fun. She was silly. I believe her whole awakening was just the Hounds of Baskerville.
Except they killed your wife, the Hounds.
Yeah, they killed my wife, and
That's
then
a bit of a deviation.
if I recall, the reason Sherlock was in Allgate was to try and find Moriarty.
The reason why it sounds so familiar is because it's very similar to Ruin's. Ruin also lost his wife and was in Alaska, kind of mournful of that. But unlike Sherlock, Ruin turns to the abyss. So that's the difference.
Yeah, the thing about Sherlock was they weren't really as mournful because, they're a ghost. They're my familiar. Also, I'm a death mage and I'm going to figure out how to bring them back.
I guess that's more healthy.
No, definitely not. We just didn't play Sherlock long enough to see the unhealthy bits.
So then what about Vizier?
Vizier was interesting. Because originally, I was going to play a very different character. You know me, I'm not very flashy. I'm not very combative. I kind of wanted to try something that took me outside of my comfort zone a little, which is why Vizier was an Obrimos and an Arrow. Is because those are two very different styles that I am not used to. But it was a lot of fun, especially playing an Arrow that wasn't a normal Arrow. Like, she didn't really protect people in the same way most Arrows would. I think her big thing was teaching others to protect themselves. And I think part of what made that so effective is the fact of Vizier was never powerful. Like, they never really got above 3 Arcana in anything. So they had to be smart with how they use their Arcana.
I do think that you had this other element to Vizier where they had a close partnership with Aegis, Nikhil's second character after Klaasbach died. And Aegis was like the power cannon to your, like you would just aim Aegis. Aegis was a bullet doing a thing destructively. And you're like, well, the Arrow needs people like you.
Yeah. Dude, Aegis was great. Because, I think originally when I first, was making Vizier, I was going to make them very, almost like a tactician where they're just kind of in the back moving little pieces and, looking at the long game. But then they met Aegis. And Aegis did some pretty amazing shit. And they were like, I can't stay back and play this safe all the time.
I remember Aegis's first outing in where we were on the mountain with Scan, And there was this Seer, and it just blew up like loads of free council mages. And he was just like, nah, you're not getting here. Oh, look, you have a sympathetic connection. Here, eat celestial fire. Blam. I remember that one. That was like his first real action in the game. So that's kind of an indication of who Aegis is. Deeply troubled, deeply flawed person with loads of emotional trauma. But he's still there. He's still there in front of everybody, trying to keep everybody safe. That was my character concept, basically. And that was your partner. And there was a little bit of friction, I remember.
Oh, yeah, especially at the very beginning. Because Vizier was not one to do things without thinking. And Aegis very much just go and get him. So there was a bit of tension there, but I think it worked out best because Vizier got to see that, hey, sometimes it's okay if we just do shit. We don't have to plan out everything.
The modicum of planning worked in the end. I mean, that's how we entered that Seer base with a little bit of planning.
True, but we wouldn't have gotten as far if you hadn't have said, fuck it, I'm going to cut a new door open.
With a Cinerite blade. That was cool.
Yeah, that was great. God, there were so many traps. Because the Seer we were hunting had both mundane and magical traps, and like the last one activated whenever you tried to dispel it. It was such a pain. It was such a pain.
But when you did defeat them, and you did defeat pretty much all the Seers one by one, it was pretty satisfying to me as a storyteller to watch the Seers get their comeuppance.
I can just talk about my favorite Seer that we had in here, and it was a man that I based off of a real serial killer, Applewhite.
Yes, I was talking about applesauce.
Yeah, he was quite hard to get to. I was very satisfied when you guys killed him because you earned it. You had earned it, and you earned every bit of magical items you got from that.
Well, okay, my thought process was I can use Faces of the Dead to infiltrate the Seers. Is it a good plan? No, but it is a plan.
Did we have good plans?
I mean, using the honeypot was a good plan.
That worked. That was definitely something that really worked out.
That was great. We had to infiltrate Applesauce's base. Aegis had created basically this honeypot item because he was collecting magical items. So it just a magical item that he has sympathy to that we can use to track where he was. Even though we didn't get him that time, like we didn't kill him, that was a really satisfying game. Like to know we could just touch him, like that was great.
Oh, he did not like that.
No, he did not. He panicked so much and kept trying to explode us. It was great.
Not just that, but we saved all those people that were buried in that place.
Oh my god, yeah, that was terrifying. He kept blowing people up on us, like possessing them and then exploding them. It was terrible and gruesome.
That was probably when I just decided, like, okay, all these Seers are psychopaths or sociopaths and they need to go. It's like they are beyond redemption.
That's right. Yeah. So, Greg, you experienced this a little bit when you were playing Suki and being attacked by those lumberjacks who were getting possessed. But Applewhite took it to the next level because he was the next level. He was a master of mind magic and space magic. He was a scary.
And forces.
So, like, exploding slaves.
Yeah, and then those, like, didn't he have some that were, like, part robotic or something?
That was the very scary thing about him. Not only was he a very powerful mage, he was a very well-funded mage. He had done very well for his exarch for quite a long time. So he had gathered magical artifacts. And like you said, he was collecting magical items. He wanted more, and he had a lot. So he was very well insulated, and he wasn't even holding most of the spells that he was using.
Applewhite was a terrible, terrible person. But, like, he was very methodical and well thought out.
There was a lot to talk about with Applewhite, and I do think that he was probably the scariest of the Seers in a lot of ways. Not the scariest of the villains, maybe. The scariest of the Seers, for sure. He was not the most effective, but he did launch those nuclear missiles. What I was thinking was about the person who killed Applewhite and exploded the nuclear missiles. I was wondering if we could hear just a little bit from a character who is tied very closely with both Aegis and Vizier, Cobalt.
Okay, let me just say that I did not remember that I killed Applewhite. I have been denying that this whole time. Sorry, Faye.
Hey, it's not your fault. You finished the job. Don't apologize. That was great.
That is what you do. You finish jobs in many ways. The protagonist of Acts 3, even through 5, though 5 starts becoming more about the entire team, is the character of Cobalt, really. And how, Abby-wise, you played her in this really profound way, which, because of the thing that I did to you where I made you part of everyone's backstories, ties this character into... you have sympathetic connections with everyone in this chat, I would say.
Yeah, that tracks. That makes sense. Cobalt was more followed by death than any character that was Damasticus, I probably think. He came in here with accused of a murder I didn't commit. And then I was the last person to see 2 characters who died. NPCs, not players, but still in the Consillium where we got locked in. And then almost got killed by a golem. I told you Thrush was a seer. I did.
Yes, people did die then.
Yeah. And I was the last to see a few of them. I mean, Cobalt was sassy and sarcastic and kind of like Suki. I had a little girl crush on Suki, even though that was a waste of food with the turkey leg. Did any of us actually eat that time? I don't think we did.
No, I'm pretty sure that
all I
people
wanted to
brought
do
out
was
food and then it sat on the tables and everyone was just afraid of being murdered that whole time.
To be fair, it was an extremely difficult situation.
People started dying almost immediately. Nope, people started dying before we got there.
I remember 2 or 3 people dying. Like the fisherman died, then this guy that was somehow familiar to Arnak died, and someone of the
He was a member of the Hall Cult, one of the sleepwalkers who lived there, and everybody met the Hall Cult in this chat.
Oh, and so many of them died.
I think he was there before we got there, though. He was how we knew we had a mystery to solve in the first place.
Ammonite really wanted to take some fighting lessons with Derek.
They just wanted to free
It's
him.
just like one of those random things. I have time to do this. I really want to do this.
I mean, there were definitely a lot of arrow mages present. Could have asked them.
I guess so.
He wanted Hunter.
Yeah, I didn't know much about the orders. I guess it just didn't dawn on me.
I mean, that's more than fair. And a lot of the arrows, besides Aegis, were kind of new at that point, so...
Everything was like really new. There's so much just new. Almost every game I'm hearing something new. So it's just...
There were 26 players in this game. I do think that a lot of the people in this chat represent some of like the heart and the soul of this game, and we're missing some other pieces like Amy and Alazuhad, who are like really protagonist level superstars. In fact, when Alex and I were designing the finale, I think there's 13 names on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
We're like, here are some possible endings for each and every one of these characters, and all of you are on it.
And we're missing, yeah, like you said, a couple, like Scan's not here either.
There were so many good players in this game. Like, it was really hard to keep track because everybody was kind of great. And like, I wanted to learn about each of the characters, but we just didn't have the time.
There was one of the major conflicts between Aegis and another very important character.
Vizier wasn't sure what to believe on that. She knew that, like, you obviously weren't lying, but you were very reactive about this. And so Vizier kind of took it with a grain of salt and really just wanted the Concilium to work together. I feel bad, but kind of manipulated you a little bit to try and like smooth things over a little bit, even if it's just like, hey, I know you like don't trust this person. You don't have to trust this person. Just work with them.
Everybody here has talked about some epic things that have happened in this game with people around them because the stories were very compelling, team. It was a great imagination play.
Well, we've given almost everyone a chance to talk except Styx.
Hey, Sam.
Hi.
Sam, you didn't enter as a character named Styx. You came in as a character named Echo, who was from another part of the world, New York City, I believe.
Yes. At the time, he was not one entity, but well, he was first 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, 6, then 7. Possibly 8. I don't know. I forgot after a while.
Yeah, I did enjoy just introducing. And then there was another version of you in the room because you would all do the same things. And so it would be entirely possible for you to like start a scene with 5 and then end a scene with 6 copies of yourself.
That was very confusing sometimes. Echo joined right at the chaos of the war.
Oh yeah, you were thrown right into it. You kind of like showed up and then all the mages were like, so we're going to go kill some Seers now. And you're like, okay. And to your credit, I think in that battle, Echo destroys nuclear missiles that are going to go and like bomb Russia. So you saved so many lives as soon as you're introduced. If they hadn't had you.
Yeah, an exchange of my own. But that was fixed later. After he died, he had a fun stint in the underworld where he walked around for a bit. Then he found an older version with some hanging from chains, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yes, that did happen. So you had already been experiencing all these alternate versions of yourself, and those were from your awakening.
Yeah.
And your awakening essentially involved as an Acanthus mage going to the Fae. And in the Fae, you stole some stuff from the True Fae, your choice to do this thing. And that was at the point where I decided that there had to be some sort of meaningful consequence, which was dividing your soul into all of these subsouls, which were all versions of you.
Yes.
The only time that you really successfully use it is in the battle where you use them to like survive the Seer's attacks and get to the spot where you can stop the missiles. That time is very effective. But most of the time you're just like, how do I get rid of all these guys following me around? We leaned into that in your resurrection because each one of the characters who died at the battle get a personalized resurrection. And in yours, Lumen, the Archmage who brings you back, kind of insinuates to you that it would be a really good idea for you to start hunting and consuming the alternate versions of yourself.
Yeah, and he leans hard into that. Very hard. I believe he gained a spell for that.
That's right. He gave you a special left-handed spell, a rope even, so it was very strong to consume a subsoul, which is something that Lumen would have had a lot of experience doing, assuming that you consider other people's souls to be subsouls.
I did think about that actually. I did not do it in the end. I found that a bit too much. I did eat several of my own self, which were fragments of my own memory, I believe, also.
I think that Azrai has a session with you. As just a little old man shows up and sticks his head, and as you are like consuming these other versions of yourself is like, hey, are you sure you should be doing that? It sure looks like a wisdom sin to me.
And that was a wisdom sin that Al-Zuhad helped him with it. Helped him get rid of cure it. Really, because I believe he consumed someone and blinded him. for a while. Couldn't see anything. I had to go with.
Oh yeah, you were absorbing different versions of yourself, and one of them was blind, and you realized that you were gaining all of their experiences. So it was making you stronger, but in a definitely your wisdom. What is your? Do you know what your wisdom is right now?
I believe only 2 actually. Just all bad. But then after that, if the next time was when he and Lorna were trying to figure out how to resolve the situation with Astrolabe. And as fate, it was weaving.
That's right. The next time that you showed up, you were solving the Astrolabe by going into the Fate Vaults. And that's kind of like the conclusion of the game. But before that happens, there is this Consillium Hall revival. And you were there for part of it. But I do think that Deva and Lorna and Faye and Aegis and Greg's character, who is now going by the name Lhasa, are all very involved in restoring the old Consillium Hall of Augate. And this had been something that, Alex, you set up in the very beginning of this game, that there was this Consillium Hall, and it had these 5 doors, and they would be opened by the artifacts.
There were 6 of them, because there was 5, 1 for each of the counselors, and then Arnox's staff, Tiana's, and then, which ended up being Lorna's.
Lorna's staff of Tiana.
That artifact had the power to command all of the other Hall's artifacts, the Astrolabe, the Ignium, the Hydroponic Quartz. But yes, that was one of the very first things I set up, was those artifacts. It was the backstory, really, the history of this Consillium Hall before the drought happened. And that was the original premise of the game.
It does feel very much like this thing that we are doing right now. It has been really to talk about the characters, and I feel like it's probably been better than having people do it one-on-one. But we should do a Q&A too, because we have so much material that we haven't told you yet. We have an encyclopedia for Acts 0 to 4. We also had one for just the Unsleeping City. And there's also ones for just like the mountain. And then we have one specifically for Act 5 involving player goals and like lines and veils, themes that we got to talk about this stuff eventually. But the Consillium Hall, this is its original concept right here. Top room has 5 doors, a staircase that comes from a business front, which is in the center of Anchorage. It's got this giant mana battery in the middle of it, and it was used by the previous Consillium, but it's been in stasis since Lumen did that thing to all those people about 50 years ago. And there's the Hall Cult, but this is the map. And I'm sure that those of you who resurrected...
I spent so much time looking at this map.
I know, right? So you'd come in through the staircase here, which kind of like winds out of the ceiling. And then there's all the residential rooms where a lot of you spent some time. Like many of you had rooms here. Arnok offered in the first Consillium meeting when everyone was getting murdered that you could stay. And who took Arnok up on that offer here?
Oh, he just had his own place. We had the witch base basically at that time.
Yeah, we also had the witch base. I think very specifically Vizier did not. Vizier did not trust staying in the Consillium Hall.
But after the resurrection.
Deva did after the resurrection.
Yeah, I think Lasso was bunking in there.
Yeah, for like a day.
Yeah, I don't think even then. I think the only place in the Consillium Hall that Vizier ever slept was the library once.
Now, Deva had a room that it was one of those rooms that didn't seem to have any beds or anything. And after I said I would take that room, Lhasa was like, isn't that a closet? And I was like, oh, even better.
But yeah, we've got the kitchen. A lot of antics went on in the kitchen. Things were cooked. Things were brought to ants. There was a lot of effort around the spirit courts. The
Eclipse made lots of banana bread.
Lots of banana bread. Yeah, and a lot of people did research in this library. It's true. Styx did a lot of research there.
I don't even know what that library looks like.
Yeah, you were mostly hanging out with the ants. And also, let's not forget the room that Aegis had to seal off down here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was because mages were like just sticking their hands everywhere, and these crystals would explode if you cast the wrong spell on them from the wrong arcana.
Hey,
And I was
I
like,
wonder who
it's
that could
most
have been.
definitely gonna happen. I'm just like, okay, let's ward this off right now. This sure that nobody can just enter here. Because that was also
kind of great,
before,
though.
everybody got woken up from their cocoon.
That's right. Everyone got
Oh,
woken
those
from
silly
the
mages.
cocoon in here. Though I do like to have in my head canon that there is still one cocoon that was hanging in that room the entire time.
That was Hermanubis.
That's right. Tempest.
Yeah.
What do you remember about your resurrections?
Well,
I remember Vizier acted on it.
We're talking about the actual time when we were reawakened, resurrected, or what led up to the resurrection.
we did a little quest by Lemon. Lemon. Remember the thing?
That's all about this number.
He called himself Lemon.
I love Lemon.
I think everyone got cool resurrections except you, Aegis.
I strongly disagree.
That was like, yeah, just being a crippled corpse, like, and then just eventually getting a new body. That was pretty handy. But he just doesn't solve everything with violence, especially when he's not like capable of punching stuff. So he can solve things without violence. It's not like an arrow that only solves his problem with violence. So that's a good thing. But it's his first option, definitely.
It's like, he's already gone. What the heck?
But yeah, that there was the little thing about everybody being tainted by the abyss. Or at least their physical bodies were. And that was probably because Lumen may have been a bit on the low side of the wisdom scale, I believe. At least that's what I think happened.
Ascended archmages don't have wisdom.
He really said it don't matter to me.
They blame that for
wrapped?
me.
I mean, are they all wrapped?
Lumen didn't have, and this is definitely spoilers, but Lumen didn't have a body or a mind in the same way that you all consider bodies and minds. Lumen was an ascended archmage. They're not people. They are ideas. And
They're
Lumen
symbols.
Yeah, they're symbols. They have become the symbol of the thing that they were ascending to become the symbol of, and they instill it in the world. They are everywhere that thing appears.
Okay, but that still leaves the question of why everybody's body was tied to the strand, basically.
Actually, I think I know the answer to that question.
I think too.
So do I.
Though I think the person responsible should probably answer this question.
How about I pass on that?
How
The
much
only thing I want to say
of that-
in regards to that, the only thing I want to say in regards to that overtly is, even if we wanted to blame Lumen for everybody else being tied to the strand, we could not blame Lumen for me because Lumen did not resurrect me.
I've got a question for all of you who were resurrected by the strand, and for Lorna and Eclipse, Charlotte's character, who were not resurrected. The only mages on this chat who were not resurrected by the Archmage Lumen well, okay, David was resurrected by Father. It's complicated, but
Oscar was the resurrection, by the way. He was not resurrected by
who?
Klaas wasn't resurrected by
Oh,
Lumen.
yeah, that's true. Klaus, your other character was resurrected by a different Archmaster in a very complicated way, and also kind of resurrected themselves. But the majority of you who were resurrected by Lumen and then tied to the Death Strand because of reasons, do you think that your resurrection was ultimately a good or bad thing, given that it also simultaneously created the Death Strand?
I think so. Because I think that it kind of tipped the scales to where things weren't balanced. And I think things were already tipping that way. So this was just a turning point where everything collided. And so we were able to actually help deal with it. Kind of.
A lot of it was like gathering information on it, though.
There was never enough time. Everything was always on fire.
Everything was on fire. I was just about to say that.
Just always. But it was kind of that way when Vizier got here, so they don't really feel very responsible for it.
Yeah, I think it was neither good nor bad. I think more of a gray area. In the end, we did a lot of good things, but our resurrection also.
I think now is probably a good time to throw it to the person who ended up ultimately deciding the ending of Allgate. Our player character hierarch, Lorna. Who was Lorna? How did you feel about everything?
It seemed like a whirlwind of chaos from the minute I joined. From the minute that she was awakened, being
that's a story I've heard echoed several times for the players.
Well, Lorna was kind of funny. She was very introverted, kind of a librarian sort of person who just spent most of her life studying myths and lore, Fae related in Scotland. And then all of a sudden she was not just thrust into magic, but taken to another country and immediately thrust into battle. And not even getting off the plane before that happened.
That's what it's like as a time mage.
Thrust into power with no idea what was actually even happening. So it was very interesting.
What were your perceptions of what was happening? What were your perceptions as someone new coming into this group of people who they've all been connected through this resurrection and this strange new space. And when other people had shown up in Allgate, the whole hall was closed, you should know. When Eclipse came there, or when Faye's other character, Sherlock, was there, the hall was literally just one room. And then they awakened the Hall cult, who had been in stasis there, and they started unlocking a couple rooms. But when you came, there was this massive, expansive, magical complex.
Yeah, it was very apparent that no one there really knew much more about what was going on than I did. They were all very powerful in their own way with their different arcana, but it was almost like herding cats just to try to get them to listen to each other and work together. And even when you as a storyteller suggested that we all just kind of have kind of a get together and get to know each other, there were protestations. What are we doing just sitting here talking? Why aren't we out there doing the things? And it's like, okay, well, let's do the things, but we can't even agree on what things are the priority at this point.
What mages are like, right? And in a lot of ways, I heard someone else express earlier, I think it was you, Faye, you were like, everything was always on fire. It is always on fire, but it depends on where your eyes can see. And you start to see more fires, the more ability you have to put out fires. And so mages can put out a near infinite number of fires. So I loved when Lorna rewound time and created this time bubble for all of the player characters to get to know not only each other, but also all the sleepwalkers that were in the Concilium Hall, because these are real people. They don't have magic in the same way as you. But you ultimately ended up making some deep connections with some of those people. One of them nursed Aegis back to health.
I really appreciated that Deva also was very, aware that those people in the hall were the ones that were keeping it running, and that we should be appreciative of them for their efforts, while we tried to figure out what the heck we were going to do.
So, can you share a bit about what it was like to wield the astrolabe and the staff, and really the biggest parts, the biggest powers in this concilium, in this land, and talk about the world tree too.
Yeah, so it was overwhelming from the minute I stepped into the astrolabe, because I think it was described by Cassidy as the storyteller that I could see the future and the past and all possibilities all at the same time.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah. And I don't feel like I was, and if, you know, like that speaks to Lorna's just personality. It was overwhelming for her to try to figure out at that point what to do or how to guide people in which direction to go. And there were a lot of things on fire, and there were a lot of different paths that we could have pursued. And the first thing that we did was go to the mountain, and who was it that got cut in half?
Oh, it was Aegis. Aegis got cut.
Aegis got cut in. That's what I thought. And then eventually died, right? And then his spirit was...
First they put his brain in a cell phone, I think?
Yes, he put his brain in a cell phone. That's right. That's right.
Got a new body. It's all fine. It worked out.
Yeah, it was fine.
Doused the first body in gasoline and burned it.
But that made Lorna very hesitant after that happened to tell anyone what we should be doing. And I think that the next thing that she went into, which was one of my favorite things, was that she and Azrai and Ammonite went on a small adventure to a cave, and Ammonite turned us into panthers. That was pretty fun. And we were able to see someone was pulling souls and sewing them together. Could you explain that a little bit?
Alex, this was one of the characters that you had created here who was tying out. There's a bunch of people who got really excited about the Death Strand. The Death Strand is this rank 10 abyssal god, which has tied in Tecton from the very beginning with Atraxis, who is Eclipse's enemy and wants to destroy the Aurora Borealis. They've empowered them, they've embodied themselves, and they are killing everybody. They're just sweeping the countryside, absorbing people, in making them into corpses, and then making itself bigger as it becomes a worldwide web of flesh. And the person that you saw was like nurturing that because they were bad.
And although we weren't able to like stop that, we were at least able to halt him from doing it at that point in time. So that was kind of at least a little encouraging, I guess.
Yeah. And one of the other big things that comes out of that mission is that Ammonite learned there that the Aurora Borealis was essentially being stitched into Atraxis, keeping it prisoner. And that's why the Aurora Borealis wasn't appearing. So then later, the players go on a mission to, well, I don't know what their goals were when they started out, but they do something about that whole Atraxis, Tecton, Death Strand connection, which is empowering the Death Strand.
I think, weren't they able to actually sever the spirit of the Aurora Borealis from and free it at some point?
At great cost.
Yeah, we did a thing.
Yeah.
So, you guys want to talk about that?
No.
Not really.
The Traitor's Tale?
I still don't know what happened
A
there.
little embarrassed about using all that abyssal magic.
That felt so bad.
It felt wrong, but
It
we were
did.
already thrust into it.
Like,
We were just like, yeah, we already in this. We had to see it through.
yeah, I get we kind of had to, because the alternative was not what we wanted. But also,
Why did you have to?
because the alternative was keeping things the same. and things could not stay the same. Otherwise, we would lose.
We had
We had to sever Atraxis and the Death Strand.
I mean, we knew there must have been other alternatives, but none were obvious to us at the point.
Yeah, everything was burning, and we didn't have an immediate better plan, and we didn't really have the time to come up with a new one.
It was right there.
It was
at the mountain.
so stressful.
So what did you guys do?
I mean, and I also want to push back a little bit. You never went to the werewolf party. You jumped.
I know, I was so sad.
And you could have gotten the werewolves on your side and done this completely differently. And you went about it with the traitor's spine instead.
Okay, but also, we couldn't schedule things. Just scheduling conflicts, a lot of the reason why werewolf party didn't happen. And I'm so sad, because I was so ready to party with some werewolves and do the full moon ritual with Eclipse, and that was going to be great, and we were going to have banana bread, and it was going to be awesome. And I might have attempted to steal a thread from a werewolf to send somebody to the moon, but that's neither here nor there.
I mean, in our defense, we were in therapy, and then we were already in the saga with the traitor's spine. We were twisted in the middle of it.
Yeah, that was interesting. Because now we are two.
So what did you guys do that you regretted?
Personally, Vizier regrets that they weren't able to soften the blow to Traitor's agony. I think that really didn't sit well with them. And they really wanted this to be the last time this would ever happen. But I mean, it probably will, because I'm pretty sure the spine is gone. We completed a ritual to carve names into the traitor's spine and then killed them. And carving the names would separate the spirits that these names belong to. And if I recall, there were 4 in total that we carved. Because there was there was the Aurora, there was Atraxis.
The Death Strand.
Yeah,
and the Death Strand.
And the Death Strand, yeah, that's right.
Well, I regret that I was the one to land the killing blow. But at that point in time, it was a mercy kill.
At that point in time, it was also, you were the easiest person to give all of the mage sites. And you had weapon
I do not
training.
regret that.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was awesome, because I literally completed all of her mage sites, so she had all of them. It was great.
If I remember correctly, the cost wasn't just killing him. What was the cost you paid?
What was it? 1/3?
In Alaska, it was 1/3. I thought it was 30%. Everybody lost wisdom on that one. Everybody involved lost wisdom.
Yeah, immediately went rampant. Actually, I'm pretty sure I still have rampant on my sheet for Celeste.
You like being rampant.
It's intriguing, because my character isn't one to flaunt magic carelessly. They do cast a lot of magic, but they don't do it carelessly. And so having them be rampant is interesting to me.
That battle there, where you went rampant and you did sever the Death Strand, is pretty much the end. It's one mission away from the real end of Augate. I like to think that it crescendos, that Augate really comes to its big conclusion where Styx shows up, stops the nuclear missiles, David also stops Applewhite and stops that whole scenario by exploding the missile and killing everyone. And then the rest of this, the weeks afterwards, is kind of like this resolution. You've all been resurrected. You're going about this bonding with each other and creating this new framework that could be what remains in Augate. And then, of course, Alex and I talking behind the scenes are like, well, what is going to be the actual end of Augate? And we decided that we wanted you to make it. We wanted you all to kind of like move the story in directions. And there were a bunch of different endings, as I hinted to before, for each one of your characters. Kind of, maybe during the Q&A, I'll reveal some of the possible endings that we had in mind for your characters.
And to choose the ending, I believe it was a session with Lorna that really decided it, and it was she was picking a different seed for the world tree of what was going to happen. And what was the exact sentence that it said, or that you said?
You wanted everything to be stable. You had this feeling, just as Faye had expressed before, that things were always on fire, and you wanted everything to cool off.
And like when they were talking a little bit ago about how they didn't feel like they had a choice, that they didn't have the time to figure out another solution. It became apparent through a session that I was told that someone was going to ascend and get too much power, and that was going to be the end of August, and everybody was going to die if I didn't do something.
That's right. And that is what happened.
A tremendous sense of responsibility. And I think that the only person that can attest to whether or not I was acting in hubris, as Azra accused me of, would be Styx. I was, in my opinion, not acting in hubris at all. I was trying to save everybody's life. And I thought us going to the world tree and begging for a chance to have a different core to put into the astrolabe to change fate was the only solution. And really, I was such a naive mage still, even though I was a hierarch, and my arcana was mostly fate. I was a fate master, so fate was everything to me. Like, I didn't see any other way around anything other than complete faith in what I believed. So Styx and I begged the world tree for another seed core, and Styx volunteered to stay behind and was hung upside down and had his eye removed with the complete faith that we would come back and save him. And then it's a little blurry. When I came back from the seed, there was already a battle. Is that correct?
Yeah, you kind of watched as everything was happening, but it was happening in fast forward, and you weren't there. You were just kind of observing it. So it did really feel almost like a dream. So you dreamed that while you were away in the world tree, and you made a specific fate spell. You were like, I want to return to the world when it is safe for the world seed.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it turns out that would be when all the mages are dead.
Yeah, that was not my intention at all.
Dead or spread onto the world.
Amy, who plays a character who got infected with the Death Strand, let's say. The Death Strand has been stripped of its corporeal body, but it still has a corporeal body in its connection to Tante Corr, who is now going by the name Ángángŭjuk, and comes in with some knives to do the real murdering of all the people who were resurrected by the Death Strand, plus more, whatever. It's a murdering kind of day. And for a time, Vizier, counters really powerful magic, keeps everybody alive. But long enough for people to reason with Ángángŭjuk and be like, hey, let's not do this. Please don't murder us. And Ángángŭjuk's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And then does. And once again, for the second time, all the people who had died die again. Eclipse and Lorna and Azrai are left standing as the only people alive, only mages alive in Augate at this point. And then they leave. Lorna and Azrai came to this place together, and Lorna and Azrai leave together. But just before they leave, before Azrai essentially kidnaps Lorna, they use their arc mastery of Prime and Forces to completely disintegrate the staff and the knives and the watch and all of the artifacts and the astrolabe. They destroy the Consillium Hall, and then they leave. And in the wreckage of strewn bodies, Eclipse and the Aurora Borealis. Maybe, Charlotte, do you want to say what happens at the very end of Augate?
Eclipse sees all of her friends die. She's very happy that Aurora Borealis has been freed. And I believe that she saw with her maybe life.
Yeah, at this point, you're a master of life and spirit magic.
Yeah, so like they weren't all dead. They were only a little bit dead. And so she combined their, like, the souls that hadn't left yet with a little bit of Aurora Borealis's spirit, so they could have the choice. They also had the choice to come back in their bodies. They also had the choice to reject the spirit and die completely, which was totally okay to do.
And while most of them did choose to return, Greg, your character, Suki Lhasa, chose not to return.
Yeah. She's a death mage. I think she's got a perspective on death that might be a little bit different to people's. So I think she felt that there was something that she needed to do, and it wasn't in the fallen world, it was somewhere else. So she pursued that. Now she's running off having adventures somewhere in the underworld or the afterlife, or who knows.
And I do think that there are implications to the mages returning with the Aurora Borealis inside of them. I think all of the mages who are resurrected are somehow now part spirit in a way that maybe is something that we've never seen before. We know that werewolves are not even part spirit, they're like full spirits. And we know that there are some mages, like neocologists, who sometimes incorporate spirits into their own beings or other beings. But I think that we've never seen anything exactly like the crew here.
Which I want to say, it really tickles Eclipse that all of her friends are part spirits, because she's like an honorary spirit and she loves spirits, so now she loves her friends even more.
I was just going to say, I think something that would mechanically make sense is the spirit attainment honorary rank, except maybe at honorary rank of like a 2. Everybody who is resurrected, so all spirits will regard them at least as a rank 2 spirit.
Okay. I mainly had asked because I do plan on playing Celeste in another game, so.
Yeah, I think that you would absolutely be treated as an honorary spirit, maybe equal to your spirit ranks, or maybe at spirit or at rank 1 if you didn't have any spirit. But that would mean that as you
Celeste has 10.
Yeah, so you would be a rank 2 spirit in their eyes, and you would also be tied with the court of the Aurora Borealis. Another thing that I would love to go through in the Q&A is, and now Ammonite, now that you're back on the call, I do want to do it a little bit because I pulled it up when you were talking about them earlier. It's all of the spirits. We designed all these spirit courts, and they're really fun.
Yeah, Ammonite
There was
put
like
a
5 or
lot of
6
work into that with the other mages.
They look really cool. I'm so sad I didn't get to explore them.
Somebody had to go and destroy it all.
While your characters will never learn these secrets, those are prices that you must pay. You all will get to learn these secrets out of game. Here are just a taste of some of our planning document. It's the Spirit Courts. Tecton rules the Earth Court. You might have known. Ta'o is a part of it. And in fact, so are all of the hydroponic courts, which were stolen/created by the mages of the time before. The Court of Burning Dreams includes Atroxus and the Death Strand, their radiation spirits, and anything that is tied to fire and innovation. And of course, that's where the abyssal taint starts to spread first. It's through humanity's creations. The Auroran Court is mostly the Aurora Borealis and its lesser entities. And then the less explored, but obviously very influential now, Court of Frozen Terror.
Yay.
Well, as I think we are wrapping up, I just want to say thank you to everybody for playing it. This has been one of the most fun games I've ever ran, ever been a part of, and it's an honor to share it with all of you.
Well, thank you all.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, this was an amazing game with some amazing storytellers and players.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
And I was probably mad for like 2 days at Azrai. Not at Seth, the player, but Azrai, the character. I was mad.
Me too.
It's okay. I spent forever when Deva stole my knife. Like, why? Just questioning. It's like at that point. Yeah, at that
I am not sorry.
Oh no, absolutely. That was perfect. I just, at that point, Vizier didn't see it coming. They weren't sure why, but they trusted you. And so that trust kind of continued, like, she wouldn't do this for no reason. There's gotta be a reason. And so I kept racking my brain trying to figure it out.
I definitely had dreams from this game. And also, one of my favorite things, which you were not privy to, is when some people ask me about my hobbies or what I do, and I describe this game to them, I'm like, yeah, so like, there are not a lot of people in the world who play this particular game, so we kind of have to just like get together from all around the world. We've got people all around the globe. We all get together at this one time that we can just manage to make it. And we've got people with like different accents, different backgrounds. We all get together and play this game where we're all wizards together. And it's just, it's a bit cool. It's a bit cool.
Especially because, like, you wake up early to do this, and then I know McKeel and Amy, they stay up late to do this, and then I think me and Cassidy is kind of just in the middle of our day. So, like, literally all different time zones every part of the day.
I love it.
Well, it was easier than explaining it to my boyfriend. I was like, oh yeah, so we play this game that's like a video game, except it's all in our heads. And I kill people. I kill people a lot. I'm very good at it. And he looked at me and he went, okay, as long as you're having fun though.
I feel that so much. My partners, they both play TTRPG games, but like I try to explain it like mage to them, and they're just like, "Oh, okay, sure."
Yeah, some people are like, "Oh, so like D&D," and I'm like, "Yes."
Either way, except we're bad people.
I don't think any of your characters are bad people.
Just made bad decisions.
Yeah,
I'm bad people, but maybe not the characters.
Yeah. No, and I think the Vizier Celeste split does show that Vizier is capable of being a bad person.
Oh yeah, and I think especially with this upcoming game, I'm kind of going to explore that a little bit. I think Celeste is kind of going to be kind of mean, but like in the most loving way. I think they're going to lean into their legacy a bit more, which is going to be a lot of fun because their legacy is all about like uncomfortable truths and teaching mages. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
What's going to be is like, oh, honey, that scarf totally doesn't go with your eyes. You should totally get rid of it and burn it. Something like that.
Subjective truth. That's subjective.
Probably more along the lines of, I don't feel like explaining this to you, so here's a whole bunch of mage sites. And just like not asking, not at all. It's like, here you go.
Well, look, there's this complicated magical trap. Explore it. Push.
Basically, that's kind of the plan. I'm not gonna lie. Like I've already prepared which spells I'm planning on casting first. I'm like, we're just gonna have these in the background. Like, I'm gonna have these prepared and ready in case things go bad, but I am absolutely just gonna let them mess around and find out. As long as they don't die.
Definitely. I have some ideas too.
It's gonna be fun.
One thing I'm wondering, though we are over time, but one thing I am wondering is I've noticed a lot of synchronicities in my life, or particularly around Alaska, but also smaller things that have to do with the characters. Has anybody else noticed anything else appearing in your life connected to Augate?
Absolutely. I feel like Lorna's kind of progression, kind of over the months that we've been playing, I would notice little synchronicities in what we were playing, and especially since Lorna's, Arcana's fate and space and time. It was funny trying to explain to people the game and then say, yeah, I'm a fate master and I control space and time sometimes. Yeah, it's cool.
I thought I saw a parallel between the hydroponic quartz and my little aquarium stuff going on at home here.
I really I resonate with that too, because I grow things hydroponically at my house right now, and I was during the game as well. So I really felt that. Whenever I was tending them, I would imagine little mages running around in the root systems and fighting spirits of disease and.
It's like, no, go away. Spray, spray, spray.
Do you have little fish in your system?
No, I don't. Not yet.
Oh, okay, not yet.
Beautiful little plant there.
Yeah, it reminds me of Palm Tree Court.
Nice.
Well, Faye, you've got a game to run. It was so nice hanging out with all of you. And I think I will try to share this in the Discord, the recording that we've made, before I release it. But I'll release this on the YouTube channel probably. Get people excited about our Discord games. Is there anything that any of you would like to add to tell the interwebs beyond our server?
That's a good thing. Well, that's the thing about Augate. A lot of people are now like getting their characters into other games. Like the story of their characters are still continuing. So that's really cool.
Magic is dangerous.
Yes.
Don't do it. Run away.
I'd say the opposite. I'd say don't be afraid.
Be brave, but discerning and cautious.
Yeah, both can be applicable.
But don't get into cars with mages.
No active hubris unless you want beats.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing I've personally had from like my takeaway from Mage is there's really never a point when you can't do anything. There is always hope.
You can always do something, but sometimes there's a price or something that needs to change.
Exactly. And sometimes that change can be bad, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong.
I'd like to say, if you're interested in Mage, we've got a great community over here full of people who would love to get to know you and be your friend and teach you Mage and explore this wonderful hobby we have together.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking about. Like, people on the outside looking in, this can be like a huge confusing world, and we're all talking, and there's probably a lot that's in jokes and references that they might not be understanding, but it's kind of wonderful. And that's what I mean when I say don't be afraid. Like, the system itself can seem daunting, the complexity, the fiction of it, everything is just a lot. But you can just dive right in and you'll end up having a lot of fun.
And what's nice about Mage is you learn one arcana, you basically know how all of them are cast. It's a bunch of building blocks. It's great.
Learn the practices. That's really important.
Yes, that's incredibly important and a lot of fun, especially when you start getting creative thaumaturgy with spells. It's so much fun.
I moved from my hometown and off to a town where I knew nobody during this, and this has really been consistent in my life and something that's helped get me through some of the hard times here. I appreciate this community a lot.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up. All right. Bye, everyone. See you on the server.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.